ladies and gentlemen, here we are on West River, Grand Island, New York, because we haven't yet made it to Europe or Tuscany or the Alps or any place in 2020. So we bring to you another episode of Beach's Audio Adventures. And, of course, we've got our mainstay question man and what's the word I'm looking for here? The connoisseur drinker. Our connoisseur drinker, Mike Knott from Thunder Bay, Ontario. How you doing, Mike?
Not too bad. Connoisseur commentator, maybe that's it. Commentator who's also a connoisseur. And I'm here tonight. I've got a shot of Cabo Wabo tequila, actually. And for people who say, oh, okay, and I hate tequila, it's generally because they drink really cheap, crappy tequila. So you gotta ante up, spend some money, spend $70 or $80 and get some decent tequila. And you'll probably like it a little more. You still may not love it, but it's decent stuff.
Yep. No, well, that's true with most everything, isn't it? Grappa's the same way.
Mm-hmm.
Cheap grappa is exactly that, cheap grappa.
Yeah, for sure. Especially a lot of those types of alcohols where they're very strong tasting, I guess, maybe a good way to say it. So when you buy a cheap one, if they're bad tasting, it's a really strong, bad taste. So, but if you get something decent, it's still strong tasting, but it should be smooth. You shouldn't be trying to drown it in salt and lemon or something or whatever it takes to down the stuff. You should actually be enjoying drinking it, not just a freight train to get shit-faced.
Exactly. It's a lot like motorcycle riding. You spend a few more dollars and get the better roads, right? We can all hang out and do loops around Chicago or Milwaukee, or we can actually pack up, get on an airplane soon, I hope, and get to someplace that's really interesting to ride a bike.
Well, I think that's when we've talked about it a little bit about mileage awards and stuff. I never did say what kind of, I don't like them, but part of them is that it's doesn't mean you enjoyed it at all. It just means that you piled on 1 million miles or 100,000 miles or whatever it be. So to me, I like throwing my motorcycle in the back of the truck and get to where the riding's good. And we can spend days riding else. I'll be out there 12 hours. That's no problem. But okay, put it back in the truck and hit the interstate. Let's get home. There's no fun in that to me. But some people really like that. So well, good for them.
Yep, I completely agree with that. If it's a place where I would like to have cruise control, it's a great place to have cruise control on my air-conditioned car.
Yeah,
whatever it happens to be, and my motorcycle's in the back somewhere. Yep.
Yeah, for sure. But we can talk about riding somewhere where that's not a concern.
Cruise control? Absolutely. Actually, we're on the agenda here, as I understand it, we're going to be talking about the Classic Alpine Adventure.
Yeah. How long have you been doing that one? You've had a few different iterations of it, have you not?
Well, since the early 80s, I suppose, when Mom and Dad started the tours back in 72, all of the tours that they conducted were 3-week tours. They started in a clockwise loop from Munich into Austria, down into the Dolomites, and then moved west from there through Switzerland into France, back through Switzerland and back to Munich. The change came in the 80s, middle 80s, I suppose, when it was obvious that in order to attract a little bit more business, we needed to cut the tours down, some of the tours at least, to 2-week tours, because Americans at least, had not enough time to complete a 3-week tour and decompress on each end. So we came up with a 2-week itinerary, which was kind of the core of their 3-week tour. The biggest difference is that on the 2-week itinerary, we don't get into France at all. So basically, since the middle 80s, we've been doing something of this. But if you really want to get seriously historical, a number of places on the Classic Alpine Adventure are places that they were staying when they started touring in 1972. So that's one of the reasons that we've tagged it the Classic, because it is.
Oh, yeah.
The hotel that we're staying at in Salzburg is one that we've used for forever, literally. The hotel that we're using in Araba, Italy, is one that we've been staying at for 35 years. So there's an awful lot of history there.
Yeah, I think you've said that you and the hotel owner in Araba, you kind of grew up together in ways, not that you're 8 years old or anything, but still, I guess a teenager. You both were, weren't you?
Yes, yep. I've got a few years on him, but I've watched him grow up, and he's watched me grow up, and we both have tales to tell about the other.
That's pretty neat. Like a lot of the places you've stayed at, it's not quite extended family, but in ways it is, I guess. You kind of have these groups of friends or people scattered around Europe that you've known for many, many years.
Exactly. Yep. That's very true. And the Schoenbauers at the Gasthaus Breuwert, they are still living nearby. So when we're staying there, we see them very regularly and watch the two kids grow up from literally infants, and now they're very capable and living adult lives. It's pretty remarkable. But on the other hand, when I think about that, Mike, I realize I'm actually getting as old as dirt.
But it's not just you too, because I've been on tour with some of your longtime tour members, and they're in a similar situation. They haven't been around as long as you. That's not quite possible, but they might be older, but they haven't been touring, been to these hotels, these towns for as long as you have. But still, I have noticed that some of the hotel owners know many of the guests also, because they've seen them so many times. It's pretty neat.
Exactly. So yeah, that's a pretty special aspect of that whole thing, getting back and seeing people that we know so well, and coming back to a place that is very comfortable, and coming back to a place that is staffed by people who are familiar with our tour members, even if they're not familiar with the specific individuals who are on a given tour. They're certainly familiar with the kind of attitude that the people come into the hotel with. And it's interesting because I did have a staff member in a hotel say, that other tour comes here. I said, I know. He said, but we like your group a whole lot more. And I said, why? And he said, because your people are really happy. He said, they come in and they smile, and they smile to us, and they treat us really nicely. The other group comes in and it seems like they're on edge, and it doesn't seem like they're regularly really happy. And it's really interesting because they were here last week, and I can see the difference right now. So, that's kind of interesting. Just observations like that I would never be able to gather, and yet here it is.
Yeah, that is. I know they've hinted too that a lot of it has to do with the van driver and the placement of the luggage in the rooms. That's a big part of that.
Absolutely. We hear that a lot when people come down to dinner and they sit down and have a drink and say, it's so nice that I've got this extra 20 minutes. I didn't have to deal with my bags at all. They were in perfect placement. I just snapped them open and I zing, zing, zing. I was in and out of the shower and down here for a drink.
It's really nice that he lays out their clothes for them too.
Right, yeah. Yeah. So what we're going to do next year, Mike, is we're actually going to suggest that, yes, you lay out the clothes and get things ready. You can decide the outfits. Just have everything ready when they arrive. And you might find that one or two people will buy you a beer here and there, or maybe even a tequila.
Yeah, maybe. Hey, that's interesting. Is it okay if I try on any of the clothes first?
I'll leave that to you. You can negotiate with the individual tour members on that.
Maybe even some of the guy stuff. But so let's talk about a tour.
Yes, let's have another shot of tequila and we'll go from there. Oh my God. Why does my screen say Captain Morgan in the bottom left corner?
Well, because I changed my sign-in name. That's The only nickname I've ever had that's kind of sort of stuck, and that one does a bit, not a lot. They'll call me that at work sometimes because my real legal name, right, is Morgan Michael Knott. And I go by Mike Knott. Ask my parents. I don't know why. Anyway, so I'm often an acting captain at work now, so I'm Captain Morgan. So.
Ah, I see. Okay, there it is.
Yeah,
there it is, right there. Who knew? Who knew? Except the firefighters in Thunder Bay.
That's right. Yeah, not even all of them. Only certain select crew.
Well, once this podcast gets around, Mike, everybody's going to know.
I would think so.
There you go.
So let's talk about the Classic Alpine Adventure. Where are we starting from?
That's an excellent tour, that one. I'll tell you what. We start in Munich, Germany. It's a wonderful place to fly into because the airport there is served from quite a variety of different major cities in the States, often with nonstop flights. So it's a great place to fly in and out of. Same thing with Canadians. There are direct flights from Toronto to Munich very regularly.
Yeah, which is always really nice because every time you stop, there's a chance for disaster. So
exactly. Fortunately, it doesn't happen very often, but if you remove the possibilities, then it doesn't happen at all.
Yeah, and Munich's just a beautiful city, just gorgeous. I really like walking around Munich.
And of course, it is the home of BMW, the Bavarian Motor Works. So it's a great place to go from the standpoint of being able to pursue some of the history of BMW. There's an excellent museum, an excellent BMW museum in Munich that's got displays that are just unbelievable, following the entire history of the company. So, and there's an awful lot to see and do in Munich. It's a tough place to get away from because it's so intriguing.
Yeah, lots of history there, right? So, and of course, depending on the time of year, I think they must be up to about 10 different times a year where they're celebrating an Oktoberfest type something, an Oktoberfest type of thing there. But yeah, they certainly like their holidays, which is right on. Yes. They really embrace their heritage there. It's great.
The Bavarians will use any excuse they can to throw a party. From there, we head south to Imst, Austria, which is a little place on the north end of the Inntal, the Inn Valley, a little bit west of Innsbruck. It's a very small town, but it sits right at the base of the Hontenjoch. And the Hontenjoch is often the first mountain pass that North American tour members have ever come over. And they get to the hotel with big wide eyes and say, wow, that was a road. That's when I know that we've got the right sort of folk on tour, because when that's the reaction, it's, hey, that's what we're doing for the next 3 weeks. Way back when, we had a couple of flyboys who were stationed up north in Germany, and they came on their full dress Harleys, and they got to the end of the Hontenjoch and said, that's crazy. Oh, yeah, that's what we're going to be doing for the next 2 weeks, is riding on roads like that. Oh, really?
And relatively speaking, that's not that crazy.
No. And I said, well, come on. You guys have been in the mountains before. Well, yeah. I said, where did you go? Well, we went over the Susten Pass in Switzerland. And I said, oh, that's kind of a super highway. And he said, yeah, I see that now. But to their credit, they both rode their dressers for the rest of the tour. They didn't take all of the roads that we ride on the Classic, but they took many of them and just did it a little slower and didn't lean over quite as far and had a great time.
Yeah, that's right on.
But Imst is lovely because it's in a beautiful section of the mountains. It is small enough to be inviting. We've got a hotel that sits out on the side of the mountain, actually, away from town. And it's just a great place to start the tour. From there, we continue to the west through Austria. And one of the neat things about the Classic Tour is that there are so many routes on each day. You can take a shorter route generally, as for example, from Imst to Feldkirch, if you really wanted to spend more time in Imst and leave late, or boogie straight there and arrive early, you could be at the next hotel in 2 hours. So you could hang around Imst until noon and hop on your bike, and 2 hours later be in Feldkirch. The really neat part about it is that you don't have to do that, and there are quite a variety of really, really interesting routes between the two. And that's another day to find more challenging roads than you had yesterday, and to ramp up your familiarity with the bike a little bit and your skills, and get a little more used to riding in Europe. The Austrians are generally very good drivers. They tend to be very courteous of motorcycles. They don't tend to go terribly fast, which isn't to say they're going slow by North American standards. They're scooting right along on roads that they are familiar with, but they're not aggressive. So it's a really nice place to become acclimated to your bike.
Yeah, you certainly see that as you go to different countries, the different driving habits they generally have. And the Austrians, like you said, very polite. They're not as fast as the Germans, it doesn't seem, generally speaking. When you're just starting out, especially as a North American rider, it's a great place to ride because you'll be fine, as opposed to starting off in Italy where you're kind of thrown in with the wolves.
Yeah, exactly. From Feldkirch, we're actually over into Switzerland. We crossed the border quite close to Feldkirch, which is in the Vorarlberg, which is right on the Arlberg Pass, and it borders Switzerland. So Feldkirch used to be sort of the gateway between Austria and Switzerland, and when there was different kinds of trade rather than motorized vehicles, when there was horses and carriages and people actually walking with their goods, Feldkirch was a very, very important place for trade. Now it's simply a border town to Switzerland. And on the other side of Feldkirch, once you're in Switzerland, you find very conservative people and very well-engineered roads and very impressive mountains. Simply a lovely place to travel. If there's any downside to Switzerland, it is the things are expensive. The Swiss actually have higher prices for the same goods than the surrounding countries, but on the other hand, they've got a natural beauty that makes me just think, well, I'm paying a little bit of a toll for enjoying these great views and enjoying the great roads. They do take care of their roads.
Yeah, for sure. Usually the roads are in great shape. The prices do stand out. And that's for people looking at the tour sometimes too. Like, why is this tour maybe this much money compared to places more easternly or wherever? It's like Switzerland's an expensive place to go to. So, but we continue to go there because it's a beautiful place and it has great roads. So.
Yep. Yeah, it is. We've got a double overnight in Beatenberg, Switzerland, which is just up the mountain from Interlaken. Interlaken sits between a couple of very impressive lakes. And we've got a hotel up there with views that are pretty well breathtaking. I mean, it's in spite of the fact that I've been going there with no exaggeration for 40 years. When I get to my room and just drop my helmet on the couch and walk across to the balcony and open the door and walk out just to see the view for the first time on that trip, not the first time for the summer, but the first time on every trip, it still takes my breath away.
I remember being there a couple of years ago, I think, and there was the air show was going on in the valley, and so the military jets were flying through. Geez, it seemed like roughly the height of our hotel rooms.
Yes. Yep.
That just added to it. Like you say, often the clouds are at about the height of the rooms we're at, and it's pretty spectacular place.
It is. And nearby are 4 of the very famous Swiss mountain passes: the Furka, the Grimsel, the Susten, and the Neufenen.
Mm-hmm.
Neufenen is the highest pass in Switzerland after the Umbrail, which is only partially in Switzerland. It sort of ends at the Stelvio.
Another great thing about that too is you're right close when you have the double overnight. If you felt like going to see some amazing views, there's 2 different mountain lookouts you can go up to. One,
right. The Jungfraujoch.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
A train that actually runs inside the mountain up to Europe's highest train station, and that is one that was used in the Eiger Sanction, the movie The Eiger Sanction. And if you happen to see that at some point, there were a variety of images that were taken from inside the train as it was going up the mountain. A long, long time ago. I think that's actually black and white, but I'm not sure. If it was color, it was early color. That's how long ago it was. And the other place is the cable car that takes you up to the Piz Gloria. Piz Gloria is a revolving restaurant that was featured in the 007 movie, Her Majesty's Secret Service.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah.
And Bond and Jaws were having a minor altercation in and on the cable car as they were going up the mountain. And that is the longest cable car in Europe that takes you up to the tip top. And from the top there at the revolving restaurant, you've got views of the Jungfrau, the Eiger, and the Monch, the three mountains that are still growing, actually. That part of the Alps is still growing. The Italian plate is pushing up against it, and it's growing about an inch a year.
So. That's quite interesting. That's a decent amount, inch a year, actually, for a mountain to be growing.
Exactly. So pretty impressive place. You're right. That is a very good point on the double overnight there. If you're not interested in riding, there are certainly things to do off the motorcycle that are still remarkable.
Oh, yeah. Just absolutely stunning. One is a bigger day to get to. The other one isn't so bad at all. The one that goes up to the 007 bar. Along the way, you pass a town called, was it Mürren?
Mürren, yeah.
And the only way to get to the town is through the cable car. So I think you can stop in the town and wander around. Mm-hmm. And, you know, if you're truly an alpiner, many of those places, if you want to go to the top of the mountain, you can simply hike up it. We see that all the time. Not something I want to do.
So you actually haven't seen that all the time from the trail going up, in other words.
Yeah.
You've seen it from the observation point when you've reached the top via cable car or train?
Yeah, and you see people as they're walking up. It's like, do they not know there's a cable car? I don't understand.
And, of course, the other thing that one can do is take the cable car or the train up and paraglide down.
Yeah.
It's possible from both the Schilthorn at the end of the cable car or the Jungfraujoch at the end of the train.
Yeah. Actually, if I'm there again, I'd love to do that. That'd be amazing from up there.
It is. So there at the end of the valley, the same valley that you've gone up through Lauterbrunnen to get to the Schilthorn cable car is the Trommelbach Falls at the end of the valley. And that's a series of waterfalls that actually runs inside a mountain. And the Swiss Army has cut away some trails that run parallel to the river, and you take a funicular up and walk down the stairs alongside the river as it works its way down through the mountain. From the outside of the mountain, you can't see it at all, except at the very bottom where it comes out as a little stream. But to be standing next to that in solid rock, and you're 30 or 40 feet back inside the mountain, and there's nothing except a slot that's been cut by the river over eons, and here next to you is this river just thundering down. It's pretty impressive. It's pretty incredible, especially in the springtime when there's snowmelt coming down.
Yeah.
And then it's really incredible. Yeah, that's another reason that we're there on the free day. It's a great place. From Beatenberg, we don't move far. We only move over to Sedrun, which is just over the Oberalp Pass. And the reason that we don't move too far is that gives us the opportunity to get over the famous Swiss mountain passes, the Susten, the Grimsel, the Furka, and the Newfoundland, and still have time to play on all of them, get a lot of photographs, and make it to the hotel in the evening. It's a very spectacular scenery, and those are on, it seems, everybody's top 10 list of roads.
Yeah, for sure. Many of those are postcard kind of shots. It's different companies. Some of them do the tour centers where you stay in one hotel and you just ride around for many days. But I personally like this better in that you don't have to go that far, but you're getting closer to these roads. And the next day you get just a little bit down the road and you're getting closer to those roads. I think it's a better option.
I tend to agree. We've looked real hard over the past 4.5 decades at touring centers because from a business standpoint, it's a great idea. I mean, it's really easy. I take your luggage, I move it. It sits in the same room for the next 5 days. I don't have to touch it again. My van can go off and do other things. I don't need an extra employee there, et cetera, et cetera. So from a business standpoint, a touring center is a great idea. The downside is that it just doesn't keep people moving enough, and it doesn't give you enough of a vista. The places that the touring centers have been set are indeed places that I would put one. As I looked at looked at these popping up over the years, I thought, yeah, that's a pretty good idea. That's because if you're there, you can go here, you can go here, you can go here, and you can go here. And then I started thinking about how you had to go here and here and here, and thought, well, gee, if they're going to those passes over there, they're riding down this particular road that I've got in my mind. And if they go to those passes, they're also riding down that road. In fact, they're riding down it in the morning to get to those passes and riding back on it in the afternoon to get back to the hotel. Interesting that that's a road that I will not send my tour members on, period.
Yeah.
Because it's too busy, it's too hot, it's too flat, it's not interesting. When I started to look at it from the standpoint of not what are the highlights that you're able to tick off from the touring center, but what is the actual riding like for most of the day from those touring centers, I got a very different opinion of them. You know, it's still something that appeals to some people, but it is not the same as moving day after day and actually seeing the different places up close. You know, we're on one of our tours, we spend the day, an overnight at the base of the Stelvio. Now, the advantage of that is that when we come in the evening, most of the day traffic is gone. So we don't have the road quite to ourselves, but it generally is pretty empty. When we leave in the morning, we've got clear roads because people are still just finishing their breakfast in a hotel that's half an hour away or 45 minutes away, and it takes them that long to get there. Well, in the meantime, we've got clear roads. Later on, we're spending time on later on in this tour, we'll talk about it, but we're spending time up on the Grossglockner. And again, we're there when nobody's there. It's fantastic. And that's not something that you can enjoy if you're trying to hit it in the middle of the day. From Sedrun, we head over into Zurz, another night in Switzerland, because it's beautiful. There are some really, really stunning and fascinating roads on the way to Zurz.
Zurz itself is another pretty little town, a ton of history there. It's very old, a lot of the buildings there, aren't they?
They are, yep. They're dating back to the early 16th century, I think. Yeah. And actually, the town was there in existence before that. Folk from a nearby canton had decided that they wanted whatever was in Zurz at that point, so they came to attack, and the locals in Zurz knew that they were coming, so they just burned the entire town to the ground, so there was nothing to take, and went up into the hills. The folk came, there was nothing to attack, they left. Residents came back down from the hills and rebuilt the town, and so that's why it all dates from the early 16th century.
Preemptive strike there. Up yours.
Exactly. From Zurz, we have the possibility to get over the Stelvio Pass, which is the second highest pass in the Alps. And that is one that sits on the border between Switzerland and Italy. For those people that are trying to put pins on the map, that's a very important pin because it is on many people's top 10 list. And then we are into Trentino in Italy and sitting on the edge of the Dolomites. Our first view of the Dolomites. And it's fascinating when you get from the Swiss Alps to the Dolomites, how different the mountains actually look. Mm-hmm. And yeah, it's something sure. that is obvious, and it isn't obvious. If you're not a connoisseur of mountains, you notice something's different, but you really can't quite put your finger on it until you sit back and look carefully at them, not riding by and watching them out of the periphery, but just sitting back and looking, and it's entirely different. The Dolomites are a very special place, and we've got 3 nights in the Dolomites, one near Trento and 2 others in Araba, Italy, smack dab in the middle of the mountain passes in the Dolomites. So the scenery around there is nothing short of awesome. On the free day in Araba, I'm routinely and regularly going out for a ride on roads that I've been riding for 40 years. I know them well, but I'll still take that day ride out of Araba just to be there because it's so great.
Yeah, amazing scenery. And another one of those places where there's a ton of cable cars around there, and I often encourage people to get on a cable car, get up to the top of one of these mountains, because the views are just stunning, and because it's Europe, they're relaxed. Usually you can bring your bottle of wine or your lunch and go up there and eat within a stunning view. So
Exactly.
if nothing else, at the end of the day, if you pull in, get in a little bit earlier, enough time to get on that cable car and just hang out there for half an hour, it's definitely worth it.
Now, the really neat thing about the cable cars in the Dolomites is they're generally fairly short because the mountains are not terribly high, and yet they're very prominent and distinct. So when you get up on top of most of them, you've got incredible views in all directions. But the cable cars are in contrast to the cable car up to Piz Gloria, which actually is probably an hour and a quarter or an hour and a half when it's all said and done, because you transfer from one cable car to the other. It's a long cable car. It doesn't run as often. The cable cars in the Dolomites are, an 8-minute trip up to the top of the mountain. And that's a great plus to the Dolomites. And it's a great, like you said, it's great to get up on top of the mountain and just get a view. And it's a great place to have a picnic.
And another thing that's good about it is that being mountain weather, you never know. So you can get into the hotel if you're back a little earlier, say 3:00, the weather was kind of lousy, rainy, you get in and an hour later it clears up. Well, you can jump back on the bike, be up to that cable car in 40 minutes and up to the top of the mountain. Within an hour, you can be at the top of the mountain, take a look at the sun.
Exactly. So another magical place to spend a double overnight. Then from Araba, we head north back into Austria, but into a very different place in Austria. And we eventually work our way up the Großglockner, which is a toll road in Austria. It is another iconic road. It's one that is very special. It truly is. In spite of the fact that for years and years and years, we were riding over the Großglockner to stay in Fusch at the base of it on the north side. Now we're staying actually on the pass. And that's magical because it allows us to get up onto the pass later in the afternoon when all of the tourist traffic, and there is a lot of it during the day, has disappeared, and allows us to be up on top on a closed road with nobody around in one of the very few really and truly dark areas in Europe. So when we're up on the Großglockner at night, there's no artificial light around. And you can kind of see from one of the villages over the hill a little bit of glow, but not significant. And the night sky there is really, really stunning.
Not surprising they don't have some big honking telescope or something up there.
Not there. Nope.
Yeah.
Nope.
Other place. And Großglockner is a toll road because it's a private road, isn't it?
Yes. Yes, it is. And then in the morning, of course, we're already on the toll road, so we don't have to pay another toll, but we're up there before anybody else does. And literally there's nobody on the road. So that's a huge difference from way back in the old days when we used to spend our time in Fusch and would make the crossing from one side to the other, but generally did it a little earlier in the day when the traffic was still there and when most of the people were coming down from the mountains. It's a remarkable change from way back in the old days when Mom and Dad used to run the tour to be on the Glockner when there's nobody there at all. We used to have to get up at 7:00 in the morning from Fusch and make a run over and back to get that kind of road. And here we've got it just routine and regular for everybody. From the Glockner, we head up to Salzburg, very famous city, Salzburg, Austria. It's been around as a very important seat of the Catholic Church for, 1,000 years now, I suppose. The oldest restaurant in Europe is there, and they were serving meals in the year 900.
Wow.
And that's our dose of culture towards the end of the tour. We've got a walking tour of the city as part of the tour, and it's a really, really nice way to wrap things up with an overnight in Salzburg and the ability to see it at a gentle pace from foot.
That should be in the brochure. Go to Salzburg, get the dose.
And then from Salzburg, it's a pretty easy ride back to Munich. There it is, the Classic Alpine Adventure, and more memories than you can imagine, all piled up in the 15 minutes that we've been talking about it, or the 2 weeks that it would take you to do it.
Yeah, that tends to be the first one a lot of people start with, because that is kind of what, when people imagine, I think, an alpine tour, that all those places are what they imagine, all those roads, all those little Bavarian towns, and it sums it up.
Mm-hmm.
Pretty
Mm-hmm.
neat place.
Yeah, it very definitely does. I mean, that really is kind of the cream of mom and dad's alpine tour, their 3-week tour, and that, I think, it's not the best of it, but it's the best that you can get together in 2 weeks. In addition to the Classic Alpine tour, we've got a couple of other itineraries that are operating in the same vicinity. One is the Dolomite Domination, and the itinerary for that is basically the eastern half of the Classic Alpine Adventure. We start in Munich and head in the opposite direction to the Großglockner. Rather than coming from the Glockner back to Munich, we go from Munich directly to the Glockner. And then we've got a couple of days in Araba to spend time in the Dolomites, over to Trentino, to Stilts at the base of the Stelvio, and then up in the general direction of Imst and Olking, and we're done. That's a 9-day tour. So it's a little quicker than a classic tour, but it does give people the opportunity to get a good in-depth look at the Dolomites. The other shorter itineraries that we have are the Swiss Splendor, which is in essence the western portion of the Classic Alpine Adventure, beginning in Olking and following the same general route that the Classic does up to Beatenberg. And then it doesn't go to the Dolomites, it cuts it short on the way back from Beatenberg back to Munich. Getting the highlights that we talked about in and around Beatenberg, to get up to the cable cars there, and to see all of the best of Switzerland. And then the last short tour that we have is the Alpine Apogee, that begins in Olking and scoots down to Slovenia, actually, which sounds like it's so far away. Well, Slovenia is right on the eastern edge of the Dolomites, so it's not far at all. We scoot into the central part of Austria and south to Slovenia, and then ride back up through the Dolomites back to Munich. So that's a really delightful tour, because it's easy to start with, and yet it gives us some fantastic opportunities in Slovenia. And the roads in Slovenia are great. They're small, they're very lightly trafficked, and they're up through really wild little mountain farms, and very, very impressive. I really like Slovenia.
Yeah, I really like riding there. Like you said, the tiny little roads. The town of Bled. I remember we visited there the first time years ago. It's like, wow, this town is just gorgeous. It's just really scenic little place. And now we stay there. It's still gorgeous. Every time we go there, it's just a stunning view.
It is.
Emerald green water, and yeah, and that's the thing. A lot of Slovenia is just that beautiful colored water and the pine trees and everything. I really like it.
So that is the world according to GARP, or the Alpine Tours with Beaches Motorcycle Adventures, at least the major ones in the Central and Eastern Alps.
So I get a lot of people ask me, what the hell's an apogee?
An apogee is the furthest or the highest point that one reaches in an orbit.
Oh, okay. See.
And the perigee is the lower part of the orbit.
So I've learned something today. This is my the salient point of my day.
Mm-hmm. Well, if you were into Estes rockets as a kid, there was one of them called an apogee.
Oh, okay. Estes rockets.
Yeah, the little model rockets with the solid fuel motors in them.
Oh, yeah.
Estes was the company in Colorado that made the first ones, made them popular and available, and actually made the motors. So
we bought something like that for Bonnie's nephew. There's nothing like giving a child that doesn't belong to you a toy that contains solid rocket fuel. It's kind of cool.
Yeah, it is. Yep. Yep. And then you go hide behind something clear and solid and watch what happens.
Yeah. Yeah, they're pretty neat. I was around a few times when they set them off, and they're pretty neat things.
Yeah.
Yeah. So okay. So we got to do lightning round.
Oh no, lightning round.
Yeah, we always end with lightning round.
I'm on the wow. All right, let's go.
Okay. Ballistic nylon or leathers?
Half and half. I like leathers for pants. Still do.
Okay. That's the 70s disco in you. German Riesling or Italian Chianti?
Chianti.
Hatignac or French balcony road?
Ooh, that's a tough one. That's a tough one. Hunt and Yolk in the morning. It's pretty brilliant. I'm going to take that under advisement and not commit myself.
Okay, can't decide. Got it. Van Halen with David Lee Roth or Sammy Hagar?
Sammy Hagar between those two. But Van Halen, he's okay, but Sammy Hagar between those two.
800 GS or 1250R?
800 GS.
Okay, that's all I got.
That's all you got.
Yeah.
That's all I got. Cool. All right, Michael. Thank you very, very much.
Okay, we'll talk again.